Centre for the official opening of the summit.
Well, thank you very much. And it's all systems go here at the Sandton Convention Centre, where delegates have been streaming in steadily for the past hour or so, I would say, in preparation and anticipation of the official kickoff of the program, which will open the Africities Summit. I can tell you that delegates have been pouring in from the various regions right across Africa, from the local government authorities there, from the various countries. So there will be West Africa, North Africa, East Africa, and of course Southern Africa. Now, as far as the program goes, we are expecting the official opening to be done by Johannesburg Mayor Councillor Parks Tau, who will then welcome delegates and kick off the program, as of course Johannesburg is the host city of the Africities Summit. But the keynote address will be coming through from various speakers. There are two speakers that have been earmarked to deliver keynote addresses. Most prominent of these will obviously from an African perspective be Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who will be speaking in her capacity as African Union Chair, and she will be giving an overview of some of the challenges facing the African continent. We know that, of course, local governments are the ones that bear the brunt when it comes to the various issues, including climate change. When people move to escape the effects of drought, moving into neighboring countries right across Africa, we see this, and that puts a lot of strain in terms of the resources that municipalities have then to outsource and variously roll out to take care of these migrants. Of course, conflict is also a key issue which drives the migration of Africans right into neighboring countries, and also impacts the planning and the resources of various municipalities. But also, Africa is a young continent with one of the youngest populations in the world, of course, and many young people move in search of jobs and opportunities, and these are some of the challenges that municipalities, local municipalities, have to deal with in issues of governance, in issues of job creation, and in issues of competition for resources, which sometimes play themselves out in very negative ways. We've seen here in South Africa with the xenophobic attacks, the so-called xenophobic attacks, which at the root cause, some analysts have pointed out, is basically a competition for resources. Now, earlier I spoke to Salga chairman, and this is what he had to say about the various issues which will be high on the agenda here.
As you are aware, there are quite a number of things that are challenges that are facing the African continent, particularly municipal governance and especially your urban areas. Our population movements and population migration is just taking place at a very unprecedented rate, this phenomena called urbanization. Unlike as it happened in other parts of the world, in the African context, it's been driven mainly by poverty. It's not driven by industrialization or economic development. Now, all of that population movement into cities is putting a lot of pressure on city infrastructure. We have to find innovative ways of ensuring that people are settled humanely in those spaces. We have to find better models for their mobility and the likes. The purpose, therefore, of this summit is for leaders in local government space from the African continent to share information, knowledge, innovation amongst themselves on how it is that they are going about dealing with this phenomena. That's one thing. But then we also are faced with a changing demography. Our cities are becoming younger. Anything between 19 and 35 constitutes more than 50% of an average city's population in the African context, which means you're talking about new sets of demand. It's not simply about water and housing. Young people are demanding internet. So it's becoming a right and not just something that you can ill afford not to be able to provide. And thirdly, there's climate change. The impact of climate change on cities, I think as we've seen it in the South African context, I mean, the drought that we're experiencing, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, is quite having a negative impact on the livelihood and the sustainability of cities as well. So those are some of the things that will be discussed here during the next 4 days of Africities.
Right, and moving forward, once the discussions are finalized, is there any particular document or any particular policy directives that will be then passed on to government from the various regions in the continent?
Without a doubt, this summit is taking place just before the COP21 summit, which starts in Paris next week. Clearly, leadership in local government from the African continent will be wanting to send a message to the world what their position is in respect of either mitigating or adapting to climate change or both, and how that has to be done, how it must be financed, amongst others. And there's also quite a number of other policy statements. I mean, human settlements is a big issue. There will be Habitat 3 next year that is hosted by the United Nations. And so this platform allows us in the local government fraternity to be able to take those positions. Clearly, we have an interest as South Africa. We are celebrating 15 years of local government from the 5th of December, and we have a story that we would like to share not only with our population but with our counterparts from outside of South Africa, so that we can get them to introspect what it is that we have done, whether they think we've done badly or are there worse things, and then we can learn lessons from that. I don't think we're saying that we've been all round good, but we think that there's a lot that we have done as the local government fraternity to put our people, our businesses, and our government generally at where it is. Implementing your national development goals, the 2030, is what we're looking at as South Africa beyond this first 15 years. Then we move into 2055 and then 2063, which is where we are then working with the African Union's Vision 2063 to encourage our municipalities to take into account the prescripts that are being suggested by the African Union, particularly the African Union's chairperson, who's been advocating the need for connectivity, the need for infrastructure to make people mobile. After all, anthropology tells us that people are better off mobile rather than being stagnated.
Right. And talking about mobility, will the summit also address the issue of free flow of people between countries? We see this phenomenon is happening anyway, regardless of the particular border restrictions and various laws. How will this summit also speak to those challenges and perhaps even improving when the competition for scarce resources doesn't play out negatively like we saw in the so-called xenophobic attacks in South Africa?
My take is that we should be cooperating around scarce skills, not competing. In other words, we have to find better ways of creating job opportunities and allowing our population in the African continent to be much more innovative. I mean, we know that if statistics are anything to go by, Africa is going to be the booming continent in this particular century. So it's quite important for us to be able to create the types of industries through and with business that allow for the cooperation around those skills, so that you avoid xenophobic attacks or attacks based on skin color or where it is that you're coming from. So that's quite important from our point of view. But you are asking what will the summit be discussing. There's about plus minus 90 sessions that will be discussing various issues, from public transportation. Migration is one of them, and therefore it takes into account the challenges that are brought about by migration into account.
Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, that was Sithole Mbanga giving Salga's perspective on the program, quite a mammoth program that will be happening here at the Sandton Convention Center for the Africities Summit. Now, I mentioned earlier that Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, in her capacity as chairperson of the African Union Commission, will also be delivering a keynote address. But it's also important to note that Minister in the Presidency for Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, Minister Jeff Radebe, will also be taking the podium to give a keynote address, and he will be introduced by Minister Pravin Gordhan of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. So we're looking at a very high-powered senior government delegation as well as representatives from the African continent. So it's back to you in the studio.
Well, thank you so much, Timawari. We'll be crossing back to you, of course, for more information of the Africities Summit at the Sandton Convention Center.